Believe it or not, when I first got this gorgeous TV, it actually looked like this. In this episode, I'm going to show you a technique I use in order to repair the cosmetic damage on this 1969 Sony Trinitron. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, and welcome to the basement. I'm Matt, and when I got this 1969 Sony Trinitron KV1210U, it had these chips and these breaks in the bezel around the screen of the TV, and it just didn't look good. It wasn't very presentable because it had all these broken parts on it. So I developed this technique that I'm going to show you in order to repair this cosmetic damage on the bezel of the TV, so it looks a little more presentable. This being a first model Sony Trinitron that was released in the United States back in 1969, I really want it to look good as it is being displayed in my collection. So I'm just going to do a little repair on it. So here are some of the materials you're going to need for this pretty much. Most of it is the polystyrene, the milliput, the sandpaper, and then a cutting tool, some tape in order to tape off the area you're working on, some calipers in order to measure the thickness of the bezel that you're working with in case you need to know what size polystyrene to order, and then just some tools in order to help smooth out and spread out the milliput. You've also got your paint thinner and the paints that you might need. And I'm going to start by just lightly sanding the areas that I'm going to be working on. Get those just a little bit smoother, just kind of doing some prep work as we get ready to fill in these areas that are broken. And I'm planning on using some material called polystyrene in order to repair it. So I'm going to take the measurement to see how thick this little lip is that's going around the TV. So I measured it to be 0.1 inch. And so that's the size of the polystyrene sheets that I'm going to be getting. So I'm going to take the sheet, it's a bigger sheet, so I'm going to cut out a smaller section of it that's close to the size that I'm going to be working with. You're not going to be able to go through this whole sheet with just one swipe, so you just want to kind of go through and score it a bunch of times until you get it cut through enough that you can snap it off and break it. Now I'm going to take this piece that I've cut off and put it up next to the screen and kind of draw out the shape of the piece that I'm going to need in order to fill in this broken part on the TV. For this I'm using some shears in order to go around and cut this rounded edge. Just being careful not to deform the polystyrene too much. Once you get that cut to the shape that you want, go through and sand it down as well. And then I'm going to use some milliput. This is a two-part epoxy putty that you can use in order to fill in some spaces and also to help bond this piece of polystyrene that we just got to the actual TV bezel. So take a little bit of each piece, knead it around for a bit in order to get it to those two parts to bond better. And then once you have that rolled together pretty well, you've got a little bit of time to work with this stuff. So I'm just going to lay it out on the spine of this piece that I have cut out. And then you're just going to kind of smooth out this milliput so that it forms a transition between your polystyrene and your bezel on the TV. Another thing you can do that I don't show here, but if you wet your fingers, you can also use that to help maneuver the milliput around. It will actually cause it to be more easily shaped. And it also makes it smoother as well, which will cut down on your sanding time later. Do your best to fill in all the cracks. If you have any mounds or any high spots, that's going to get all sanded down later. So here's what you can kind of see, a rough draft of what it's going to look like. You can already see it kind of makes a big difference on the TV. To have the straight edges going all the way around looks much better than having a big piece broken off of that bezel. Alright, so now that I've given that time to cure, I'm going to go around and sand it down. So I'm going to start sanding this down and actually use quite a few grits of sandpaper, starting from as coarse as 80 all the way to as fine up to 12,000. You really want a wide range of sandpaper in order to get this super smooth. If you only use like 80 or 100, you're going to have a bunch of scratches and stuff in it. So you want to start with some coarse sandpaper, even not too coarse. You can probably start at 320. That would probably work just fine. And then, but work your way to about 12,000 to really get it polished down and smooth, so that when you paint it, it actually looks really good. So here you can see again some steps in the process of how it's looking after sanding has been done. It's really looking a lot better, and once we put some paint on here, it's going to make a big difference. Alright, now I'm ready to paint this edge, so I'm going to turn it on its side so it'll be flat and level. You can take some of this tape off because you're going to have to really blend in the paint. If you leave tape, you're going to have this high edge where the tape was, and it's not going to look very good. So any tape that's in the way, you can get it out of the way. So clean this edge with like some 99.9% IPA in order to get any kind of grease or little pieces of flakes that you've been sanding off. Just get it super clean so there's nothing on there that's going to interfere with your painting process. I always start by dipping my paintbrush in the paint thinner first, and this will help the paint come off of the paintbrush more easily, and it's also going to help make your paint a little bit more runny, because you don't want to glob the paint on here, otherwise it's not going to look good. You use some paint thinner in order to thin out that paint so it runs out and it kind of does a little bit of self-leveling. Now, paint is not magic, so you're not going to be able to put a coat of paint on here, and if you didn't sand it properly, it's not going to fill in all of those little crevices, all those little scratches that you've made in the surface. That's not how paint works. But if you go through and you actually sand it properly, and then you use paint thinner as you go through and use it on your paint. Here I'm using semi-gloss paint. The flat black was a little too flat, it didn't look right, so I went and got some semi-gloss because I thought gloss would be too much. And now you can see that the paint is super thin, it's very runny, and this is going to help us to be able to spread it out more evenly and blend it in to the black that is already on the bezel of the TV. So go through and touch it up, make sure you get all the way to the edge. If you see any little air bubbles forming in the paint, do your best to pop those with the paintbrush so you don't have those kind of deformities in the paint. And if it doesn't look good, just take some paint thinner, clean it completely off, and start all back over. Alright, and there you have it. Once it's had time, the paint has dried completely, you can go around and touch up the front edge with some paint that's similar, being very delicate on it, and now it looks like almost a brand new TV. Looks fantastic. So if you want to, try this out on your Trinitron. If you just have like a crack in the bezel, maybe you can use something like that Milliput to fill it in and then sand it down and put a little paint on it. But I think it's a really good technique, and the thing that I would probably change the next time I do this is I would try an airbrush. That's something I don't have right now, but I could get one, learn how to use it, and that would probably be much better for actually painting this than a paintbrush. So there you have it, just a technique I've been working on for repairing some of the cosmetic damage on these early Trinitrons. Hopefully you can use it on some of your sets as well, and if you do, let me know how it goes. Thanks so much for stopping by the basement, and I'll see you next time.